versus Attorney General of Kenya, 1959 East Africa. It was said that though the objection of a preliminary objection is expedition, the point of law must be one which can be decided fairly and squarely, one way or the other, on facts agreed or not in issue on the pleadings, and not one which will not arise if some facts in issue should be proved. The primary point here is therefore dismissed. On the issue of where the applicant's rights to personal liberty were infringed, I turn out the substantive application. It would be practical to deal first with the case of the second applicant. As filed, the application and the affidavit in support state that both applicants are restricted. It is the position of the respondent, as averred in AIGP Edward Ochom's affidavit in reply, that the movements of the second applicant, one Barbara Kyagulanyi Itungo, and the other members of her household have not been restricted in any way. It was also submitted by counsel for the respondents, Mr. Martin Mwanwisya, that the second applicant, Barbara Kyagulanyi Itungo, is not under any kind of restriction. The application states that Barbara Kyagulanyi Itungo, the second applicant, is indeed restricted and prays for appropriate orders. The respondents deny any such restriction. In view of the above, this court hereby issues an order for immediate restoration of Barbara Kyagulanyi's full personal liberty. Turning back to the application of the pertinent facts as this court discerns them, that the first applicant was a presidential candidate in the just concluded presidential elections. On the polling date, the 14th January 2021, the first and second applicants went to cast their vote and thereafter turned to their home in Magere, Kasangat Town Council. That evening, their homestead was surrounded by several soldiers and police officers. It was stated that during the campaign period, the first applicant has been arrested and charged with several offenses. A number of conditions were set before he was finally granted bail on 20th of November 2020. The first applicant flouted a number of these conditions. It was also suspected the applicant was planning to instigate and fund insurrection. The respondents have restricted the first applicant movements, confining him to his home. Additionally, lawyers who have tried to see or meet the applicant have had to seek the prior consent of officers of the respondents before they are granted access to the applicants. The respondents state that the applicant is not in custody, but the police is giving him the necessary protection. It is in these circumstances the applicants have commenced this application under Section 34 of the Judicature Act, which stipulates that the High Court may, at any time where the person is deprived of his or her personal liberty, other than in execution of a lawful sentence or order imposed on that person by a competent court upon a complaint being made to the High Court by or on behalf of that person, and if it appears by affidavit made in support of the complaint that there is a reasonable ground for the complaint, award under the seal of the court a writ of habeas corpus directed to the person in whose custody the person deprived of property is, and when the return is made, the judge before whom the writ is returned shall inquire into the truth of the facts set out in the affidavit, and may make any order as the justice of the case requires. A writ of habeas corpus is defined by 9th edition Black's Law Dictionary as the writ employed to bring a person before a court, most frequently to ensure that the person's imprisonment or detention is not illegal. The procedure for applications for this nature is regulated by the Judicature Habeas Corpus rules. Ordinarily, as stipulated in Rule 3, the application should be filed as presented ex parte. This court has, however, chosen to proceed under Rule 4, which stipulates the court to which an application under Rule 3 of these rules is made ex parte or may adjourn the application so that the notice of application may be given to such a person as the court may direct. Secondly, where the court directs the service of the notice on any party, unless the court otherwise directs, there shall be at least 4 clear days between the service of the notice and the date named in it for the hearing of the application. It was under these provisions that the court directed the respondent to be served and the time for service be abridged for the hearing to proceed as it did. That said, both sides have relied on the Jovia Karuhanga versus Attorney General of Police MC 86 of 2013 for definition of the perimeters of the writ of habeas corpus, and it was stated by the court that the corpus is to review the legality of the applicant's arrest, imprisonment, and detention, and challenge the authority of the prison or jail warden to continue holding the applicant. The application is used when a person is held without charges or is denied due process. It ensures that a prisoner can be released from unlawful detention, that is, detention lacking sufficient cause or evidence, or detention incommunicado. The detention must therefore be forbidden by the law. An application of this nature does not necessarily protect other rights, such as entitlement to a fair hearing. It was held in the Constitutional Reference 7 of 1998 in the matter of Sheikh Abdul Karim Sentama and another Constitutional Reference 7 of 1998 that the writ is considered to provide an assurance that personal freedom will always be protected. In the instant case, the applicant is not in a gazetted detention center but his own home. The evidence here clearly shows that the applicant has been confined in his house since the 14th January 2021. The respondents state that the restrictions are not custody but are to give the first applicant necessary protection. By their own admission, the respondents concede that the applicant's movements have been restrained by confining him in his home. Does that amount to restricting his liberty? Liberty is defined by the Black's Law Dictionary 8th edition as freedom from arbitrary or undue external restraint, especially by a government. Without dwelling on this legal definition, a lack of unrestrained movement or freedom to choose would fit a definition of lack of liberty. Considering the above, I find that the respondents have indeed had the personal liberty of the applicant curtailed. This court has the mandate under Section 34 of the Judicature Act to review or inquire into the legality of his continued confinement to his home as it amounts to deprivation of personal liberty. This court is therefore acting well within the mandate to make the inquiry, which answers the preliminary point of law set up at the beginning. The justification given by the respondent is that because of security threats that have been detected by security, the applicant's movement outside his home have been met with preventive action to protect life and property. That this action is premised on Section 24 of the Police Act Cap 303, which provides as follows. A police officer who has reasonable cause to believe that the arrest and detention of a person is necessary to prevent that person from causing physical injury to himself or herself or any other person. B, from suffering physical injury. C, from causing loss or damage to property. D, from committing an offense against public decency in public place. E, from causing unlawful obstruction on a highway. And F, from inflicting harm or undue suffering to a child or other vulnerable person. Then the police may arrest and detain that person. The provisions of Section 24 as stated here envisage the action of a police officer arresting a person whom the police officer believes is about to commit any of the acts listed in the section. Under Section 14 of the Criminal Procedure Code Act, a police officer who makes any kind of arrest must, without unnecessary delay, take the arrested person either before a magistrate or an officer in charge of a police station. Under Section 25(1) of the Police Act, the police officer who arrests any person without warrant shall produce that person before a magistrate within 48 hours. It cannot properly be said that Section 24 would apply here as stated by the respondent in their submissions. Firstly, the third respondent states that the applicant is not under arrest. Secondly, if he was, then he would have immediately been dispatched to a police station or produced before a magistrate as required by law. It is therefore true that if indeed this was a preventive arrest, the applicant would have been formally arrested and detained at a police station or produced before a magistrate. The more pertinent questions are the allegation that the National Unity Platform is training members to sustain riots and insurrection, and that the applicant has in the past incited riots and have led to unnecessarily make Uganda ungovernable like Libya, Iraq, Sudan, that he disregarded COVID restrictions, that he flouted the conditions set for his bail. The third respondent stated that the first applicant's movements outside of his home have been met with preventive action by the Uganda police within the aim of neutralizing the security threats. The respondent submitted that the actions of the applicant are intended to destabilize the peace in the country, that the respondents are charged with ensuring public safety and general right to life of Ugandans, that under Article 43 of the Constitution, in the enjoyment of rights and freedoms, no person shall prejudice the fundamental rights of others or the public interest. Mr. Medard Segona for the applicant submitted these allegations constitute suspicion of crime which should be handled according to the due process of law, that they cannot form the justification for holding the applicant incommunicado. This court agrees that it is true these are all serious allegations of grave offenses. In the circumstances, since the third respondent states that it has the evidence, it would be proper to follow the due process of the law with regard with all the allegations made against the applicant. The options are to produce the applicant in court to face trial or to lift the restrictions. Due process has been defined as the conduct of legal proceedings according to established rules and principles for the protection and enforcement of private rights, including a notice and the right to a fair hearing before tribunal with power to decide the case. This is in accordance with Black's Law Dictionary 8th edition. Article 23, Clause 1 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda stipulates that no person shall be deprived of personal liberty except in any of the following cases which are listed, and in a subclause C, for the purposes of bringing that person before court in execution of the order of a court or upon reasonable suspicion that the person has committed or is about to commit a criminal offense under the laws of Uganda, and under subclause B, for the purpose of preventing the spread of an infectious or contagious disease. Article 23, Clause 2 stipulates a person arrested, restricted, or detained shall be kept in a place authorized by the law, and under Clause 4 it is stated the person arrested or detained upon a reasonable suspicion of his or her having committed or being about to commit a criminal offense under the laws of Uganda shall, if not earlier released, be brought to court as soon as possible, but in any case not later than 48 hours from the time of his or her arrest. And Clause 5 provides that any person restricted or detained, the next kin of lawyer, personal doctor, or that person shall be allowed to have reasonable access to that person, and other subclause C, that a person shall be allowed access to medical treatment, including at the request and at the cost of that person access private medical treatment. Under Clause 9, the right to order of habeas corpus shall be inviolable and shall not be suspended. As the applicant has been held from the 14th of January on the allegations stated in the IAIGP Edward Ochom's affidavit, then the specific fundamental right in Article 23 of the Constitution reproduced above would apply with full force in this case. This way, the public interest, including the greater well-being society, is properly balanced against the individual rights of the applicant. If indeed he is a danger to society, the due process of the law must be allowed to take course. In the Supreme Court case of Charles Onyango Bo versus Attorney General, Constitutional Appeal number 12, 2002, it was held that protection of the guaranteed rights is a primary objective of the Constitution. Limiting their enjoyment is an exception to their protection and is therefore a secondary objective. Although the Constitution provides for both, it is obvious that the primary objective must be dominant. It can be overridden only in the exceptional circumstances that give rise to that secondary objective. In that eventuality, only minimal impairment of the enjoyment of the right, strictly warranted by the exceptional circumstances, is permissible. The exceptional circumstances set out in Clause 1 of the Article 43 are the prejudice or violation of protected rights of others and prejudice or breach of social values categorized as public interest. In the case of Honorable Sam Kutesa versus Attorney General Constitutional Petition number 46 of 2011, it was said that the subject of the preservation of personal liberty is so crucial in the Constitution that any derogation from it, where it has to be done as a matter of unavoidable necessity, the Constitution ensures that such a derogation is just temporary and not indefinite. The Constitution has a mechanism that enables the enjoyment of the right that has been temporarily interrupted to be reclaimed through the right to the order of habeas corpus, which is inviolable and cannot be suspended, as well as through the right to apply for the release on bail. Section 34, subsection A of the Judicature Act stipulates as set out in the affidavit and may make any other order as the justice of the case requires. Having considered all the circumstances of this case, it is my finding that the continued indefinite restriction and confinement of the applicant to his home is unlawful. In the result, it has been established that his right to personal liberty has been infringed. The first issue is therefore answered in the affirmative. On the second issue, whether the applicant is entitled to the remedies sought, the applicant had prayed for a writ of habeas corpus. This court will proceed under Section 34 of the Judicature Act as cited above, and Rule 6 of the Judicature Habeas Corpus Rules, which stipulates, without prejudice to Rule 4.1 of the rules, the court hearing the application of a writ of habeas corpus may, in its discretion, order that the person restrained be released, and that order shall be sufficient warrant to the officer in charge of a prison, police station, public officer, or any other person for the release of the person under restraint. Having found, as I do, that the restrictions imposed on the applicant are unlawful, it is hereby ordered that they are lifted. Consequently, an order for restoration of the personal liberty of the applicant is hereby issued. Secondly, the respondent made a prayer for the applicant to comply with the standard operating procedures with regard to COVID-19. This court takes judicial notice of the violent nature of COVID-19 and the above public health necessity to comply with the SOPs. It is therefore hereby ordered that the applicant shall comply with the SOPs set by the authorities. The applicant is accordingly granted costs of this application, and that is the ruling by Justice Elubu Michael of this court. This is an application filed under Article 23, Clause 7 and 9, and Article 44D of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, Section 34A of the Judicature Act, Rules 3, 8, and 13 of the Judicature Habeas Corpus Rules, and the applicants seek the following orders. 1. A writ of habeas corpus be issued ordering or requiring the respondents, their servants, agents, officers acting on their orders to produce the bodies of the applicants before this court for appropriate orders. And 2, costs of this application be provided for. The grounds on which this application is based are stated in the notes of motion and elaborated in the supporting affidavit of one Mr. Liam Sima Geoffrey, which are both reproduced in this application, and I will not go into those details of the affidavits which both parties are conversant with. The parties made oral submissions, and these are not reproduced here but shall be referred to in resolving the issues which have been framed. And the first issue to be resolved is where the applicant's rights of personal liberty was infringed, and the second one is where the applicants are entitled to the remedies sought. In resolution of the first issue, before going into the main issue, a question arose regarding the legality of the affidavit in reply of AIP Ochom Edward. It is stated that the affidavit is a scanned copy and could not therefore have been shown before Commissioner of Oaths. Secondly, that the affidavit bears no date, which renders it a nullity. The respondent argued that this court rely on the decision of the Supreme Court in Mary Mavirizi versus Attorney General, where it was held that a defect in a jurat or an irregularity in form of an affidavit cannot be allowed to vitiate the affidavit in view of Article 126(2)(e) of the Constitution, and that the judge has the power to order that an undated affidavit be dated in court, or that the affidavit be resworn, and may penalize the offending party in costs. In resolving this preliminary point, this court will start with whether the affidavit is a scanned copy and was not therefore signed before the Commissioner for Oaths. I have examined the signature of the affidavit on the court record. It is in black ink and is clearly not an electronic print. It bears an imprint of the pen pressure left when the deponent signed, and for that reason the submission that it is a scan is dismissed. The second question is lack of date on the affidavit. This court will rely on the decision of Marema Virizi, where it was held that both the applicant and the Solicitor General relied on the case of Kasara Growers Cooperative Society versus Kakoza Jonathan and another Supreme Court civil application number 19 of 2020, which draws a clear distinction between an affidavit which is defective and one which does not comply with the requirements of the law. The one which is defective is curable, and the one which does not comply with the law is incurable. An affidavit which is undated is defective, but is one that can be cured. The holding goes on to state that in dealing with a defective affidavit, the case of Honorable Theodore Sechko and 3 others versus Attorney General and others, Constitutional Application number 6 of 2013, followed the case of Bako Arab Espanol versus Bank of Uganda, civil application number 8 of 1999, where it was held that a general trend is towards taking a liberal approach in dealing with defective affidavits. This is in line with constitutional directive enacted in Article 126(2)(e) of the Constitution. Rules of procedure should be used as handmaidens of justice, but not to defeat it. Relying on the above ruling, I find that the lapse to date the affidavit was a mere defect which should not vitiate the affidavit. It is also true that as this matter is of considerable public interest, it would serve the justice to have all the evidence on record before proceeding. The affidavit is accordingly admitted. For that reason, the respondent will pay the costs for the defects. The respondents also have a preliminary question of law, whether this application is amenable to the provisions of Section 34 of the Judicature Act, which provides for the prerogative writ of habeas corpus. The respondent argued that the applicant were not under detention in any designated government facility. Secondly, that the application for a writ of habeas corpus cannot be used to protect or enforce the rights such as fair trial. That the applicant cannot use this application to challenge the restrictions that have been imposed on him. For those reasons, the application was misconceived and improperly before court and ought to be dismissed. The applicant opposed this objection. This court finds that the question regarding the nature or the extent of restrictions imposed on the applicants can only be definitively resolved after consideration of the evidence. For that reason, it would take a finding on whether the restrictions stated have a bearing on the liberty of the applicants before resolving this issue. It cannot therefore be handled as a preliminary point of law. This position has consistently been followed by the courts as cited in several decisions, like in Mukisa Biscuits Manufacturing Company Limited versus West End Distributors Limited, 1969, East Africa, where the court stated, the preliminary objection is in the nature of what used to be a demur. It raises a pure point of law, which is urged on assumption that all the facts pleaded by the other side are correct. It cannot be raised if any fact has to be ascertained or if what is sought is the exercise of judicial discretion. In another case of